If you want a new dress watch today, and I mean a real classic watch with ties to history, beautiful movement finishing, and a real movement inside, something that actually looks and feels good on the wrist, something that makes you feel like you can go out and conquer the world, these brands want you to spend like $30,000. That's basically the price tag for a modern Patek Philippe Calatrava, something from Lange Söhne, along with competitors like Vacheron Constantin on down the list. But there's an era where you can spend, say, $10,000 to $25,000 and get some of the best dress watches ever made. I'm talking watches with better movement finishing, real history, before all the consolidation and conglomerates that define luxury watches nowadays. Watches that, honestly, I think are more interesting and well-proportioned and offer a lot more than their modern counterparts. Today, let's take a look at some of the best dress watches from the 1990s. To understand why the 1990s matter for dress watches, let's situate ourselves where we are in the history of Swiss watches. We're about 2 decades removed from the currency and quartz crisis of the 1970s. The brands that have survived, and there aren't many, are asking themselves, what's the point of a mechanical watch when a $5 Casio, when a $50 Seiko can do all that and more for a fraction of the price? Most brands, at least the ones like Patek Philippe, Lange and Söhne, some of the ones I mentioned, arrived on one answer: craft, complications. Showing off what watchmakers and manufacturers can do for its own sake, for the sake of building beautiful objects. I want to focus on 2 of those brands today, along with one other brand that might surprise you, a brand that until the 1990s was mostly known for quartz, diamonds, jewels, and things like that. Before we get started, my name's Tony. I write a newsletter about watches called Unpolished. I started it about a year and a half ago after leaving my job as an editor at Hodinkee. You can join the newsletter for free to get updates below in your inbox every week. You'll get free newsletters, but it is supported by paid subscribers, enthusiasts, and collectors like you, and I don't run ads for watch brands because of that. Patek Philippe didn't need to reinvent itself in the 1990s. It was already perhaps the most prestigious watchmaker in all of Switzerland, if not all of the world. But under Philippe Stern, who was running the family business at the time, it did start to ask itself uncomfortable questions. Are we actually making modern, beautiful watches, things that people want to buy in the 1990s turning into the 2000s? The reference 5000 Calatrava is my favorite answer to that question. It's got a fascinating backstory, one of the most interesting in all of modern watches, in my opinion. It was born out of a supposed or almost collaboration between Patek Philippe and Ferrari. If you can imagine, one of the most important watchmakers in the world partnering with the most recognizable car company in the world. But supposedly Enzo Ferrari and the Ferrari team wanted the prancing horse logo on the dial, and Philippe Stern was much too tasteful for that. So they put a kibosh on the whole collaboration. But they kept the design of the watch. You can still see the inspiration of 1950s cars and Italian speedometers if you look at the dial on the 5000. Those clean, stark, pad-printed white numerals against the glossy black dial, which is basically impossible to photograph. The hardest thing I've ever photographed. It looks like those old instruments, but it looks beautiful on this modern watch. It's beautiful, modern, unlike anything Patek Philippe had ever produced at the time. It's about 33 millimeters, which is slightly larger than some of the other Calatravas we're going to talk about. And another interesting thing is that it uses the Patek Philippe Caliber 240, which is actually an automatic micro rotor movement. Until this time, Calatravas were mostly known, with some exceptions, for being manual wind watches. So this is bringing the Calatrava into the modern era. It's a Calatrava that almost doesn't look like a Calatrava, hardly even follows the definition of it. From a distance, you might think it's a steel watch with a black dial. It feels pretty sporty. The first 1000 reference 5000s were made in white gold with this black dial. It was so popular, sold out so quickly, that Patek Philippe brought it back in the 1990s in different ways. So it brought it back with yellow gold, with rose gold. If you can find one of those first 1000 from 1992, 1993, I've written an article where you can find the serial numbers. I think it commands a bit of a premium compared to later examples. And I always prefer the G, the white gold 5000, compared to the later ones in yellow and in rose gold. It's just more pure and more, I think, of the vision of the Ferrari collaboration that never was to me. You can find them for maybe $23,000 to $26,000, depending on condition, whether it has a Patek Philippe extract or not, and so on. It's not a perfect watch by any means. I think those white hands look a little bit unfinished, especially for what you might expect from a Patek Philippe. And there's kind of an argument that it's caught between identities, right? It's a modernish looking watch that's drawing on the cues of old, and sometimes maybe it gets caught in the middle between a dress watch and a sports watch. Which one is it? No one really knows. To me, I think that tension is what makes it such an interesting and compelling product and one of my favorite modern Calatravas, though. A couple other Calatravas I want to mention before we move on to the next brand. The 3796 was introduced in the 1980s as the follow-up to the classic Patek Philippe Calatrava 96, the original one that was introduced in 1932. This is a watch that stayed at that 31 millimeters smaller diameter. It's a little small by modern standards, though I know it's experiencing a bit of a comeback. The 3796 still uses a manual wind movement. The classic iteration is kind of yellow gold with a silver opaline dial. My favorite, my personal favorite, is a pink gold with a matching pink dial. You might pay twice as much. So if a yellow gold is 15,000, you might pay twice that for a pink on pink example, as it's called. But again, a classic watch. It was drawing on the cues of the 1930s, and it's going to be a classic in the 2030s and beyond. One more I thought I'd mention is the Calatrava reference 5022. So this is a watch with a white lacquer dial and brigade numerals, manual wind movement, but it measures, I would say, 32, 33 millimeters, super thin. It's got that stepped case that I think just gives it a little bit of interest, something a little bit different than that staid, almost boring 3796 or 96 look. Again, similar price as a 3796 though. One more 90s Calatrava that I would look for if you're kind of bargain hunting or value hunting for something that's a Patek Philippe Calatrava, but don't want something modern. Again, all of these classic sizes, classic watches. This is when Philippe Stern really defined Patek Philippe as a maker of one, beautiful classic watches, and then the complications and the complicated watches, the calendars, the chronographs that get all of the attention. But the Calatravas are, for most of us, like you and me, things that we can aspire to own and wear every day. Beautiful dress watches that, to me, get the cues of a Calatrava right than many of the modern stuff. Now let's look at one of the other most important stories of the 1990s. Lange Söhne hadn't made a watch since 1948. It was founded in Glashutte, Germany in 1845 by Ferdinand Adolf Lange. It was nationalized by East Germany after World War II and essentially ceased to exist as a private enterprise for 4 decades. But then the Berlin Wall fell. That's when Walter Lange, the great-grandson of F.A. Lange, partnered up with Gunther Blumlein, one of the most important executives of the 1990s, to bring back Lange Söhne. Gunther Blumlein is, like Philippe Stern, one of the most important figures, one of the giants of modern watchmaking. He brought Lange Söhne along with Jaeger-LeCoultre and IWC, kicking and screaming sometimes in the modern era, defining their watchmaking, their aesthetic for generations to come, really. But let's start with Lange Söhne here. They had roughly 4 years after the Berlin Wall fell to redefine and rebuild Lange from basically nothing. They relaunched the brand with 4 collections in 1994. If you're looking for a classic dress watch from the bunch, the Saxonia big date basically is where I'd start. To me, the Lange one is a little bit big to be a classic dress watch, though it is beautiful. The Saxonia is 34 millimeters, 9 millimeters thick. Famous watch writer Waldo Detz wrote at the time that it was kind of like a biscuit. I wouldn't go quite that far, though it is a little bit thick for its sort of slight proportions. It's instantly recognizable, though, because it's got that big date inspired by the Dresden Opera House at 12 o'clock. Under that, it's got that split Lange and Sohne signature, and then basically not much else, right? It's got simple markers, sub-seconds, just a classic watch in Lange style. So Lange did closed casebacks at the time, quite demure to hide the beautiful finishing and 3/4 German silver plates that it's now known for and are generally showed off. But at that time, the closed caseback of the Saxonia was hiding a secret. It actually didn't have a round movement that fit the case. It was using a tiny rectangular movement that Lange was using for the Arcade, one of the other 4 collections that Lange introduced in 1994. It wasn't until 1997 that the Saxonia would get its own round movement, which we'll talk about more. It's funny because it's basically a technical flaw, but nowadays collectors like you or me would pay a premium for these early arcade movement Saxonias. They only came in yellow gold, closed caseback, and you had a choice between gold or blued steel hands. In 1997, when Lange updated the movement to a round movement, the L941.1, it expanded the line to white gold and platinum. The white gold had blue dials, part of the blue collection, kind of a collector favorite in Lange. Whereas the yellow gold stayed with a silver dial. The platinum also had a silver dial, though you can also find black in some of them. The Saxonia after that stayed in the collection for 10 years until Lange sadly updated it in 2007 to a 37mm case size. It stays in the collection today, but in a little bit more of a upsized case. You can find the yellow gold Saxonia for maybe $20,000 today. Add on a few thousand if you're looking for platinum or special dials like blue, or if you want one of those early arcade movement Saxonias. But like I said, you're buying a legitimate piece of Lange history, something that was only made for the first couple of years before it was updated. The Lange 1815, which came in 1995, is where I think Lange's dress watch efforts really crystallized, though. It's named for the birth year of F.A. Lange, but it measures 36mm and just 7.5mm thick. So that's a little bit bigger than the Saxonia, but almost 2mm thinner. It just makes for a better proportioned dress watch if you're looking for something slim and beautiful on the wrist. It shares that round manual movement with the Saxonia thin. It was actually introduced in this watch in 1995 before Lange put it in the Saxonia a few years later. To me, it's all about those numerals on the dial side. Bold, black, slightly Gothic, unmistakably German. It's one of the best, if not the best, numeral designs in all of watches to me. I also want to talk about case construction because I think what gets lost oftentimes when we talk about Lange's movement making, and beautiful they are for sure, the 3/4 German silver plates, those beautiful hand-engraved balance cocks. We forget that they also make a beautiful case. So the typical case construction of Lange, you really see it in the 1815 here, I think because there's not much else to look at. Three-piece case construction, a polished upper bezel and a polished case back is intersected by a brushed mid case. And then it's all about the lugs. So the lugs are soldered on and then they have this notch that gives it this interesting structure. You can tell it's something different than the typical Swiss-made construction. And I think Lange doesn't get enough credit for how beautiful their case construction is. Perhaps because they carry it over to most of their watches, but I think it's on its best display in thinner watches like the 1815 here. The original 1815, like the Saxonia, was discontinued in 2008, sadly subbed for a 40mm version. Okay, I promised a surprise brand that was making watches on par with Patek Philippe and Lange beginning in the 1990s, a brand that was mostly known as a maker of jewelry, quartz watches, happy diamonds. You know I'm talking about Chopard now. So in the 1990s, Carl Friedrich Schäufele, the family owner of Chopard, decided that the brand, if it was going to survive, needed to become a true manufacturer. That's when he took a few years to establish his own caliber. It became the LUC collection, which is still a core part of the brand's offering today. They only make a few thousand LUC watches every year, basically roughly on par with what I think of as Lange's production, which is estimated to be around 4,000, 5,000 watches. We don't really know. Much less than Happy Diamonds, even Alpine Eagles. But in the 1990s, Chopard took a few years to develop its own micro-rotor movement, something similar to the Patek Philippe equivalent we were talking about. The result came in 1996 with the caliber 196. It's a micro-rotor, but with an impressive 2 barrels that gave it 65 hours of power reserve, along with being COSC certified and Geneva seal. A really impressive accomplishment from Chopard, who up until that point hadn't made its own movements. It was introduced in a watch a year later in the LUC 1860, a beautiful dress watch, 36mm, about 9mm thick. It doesn't stop at the movement though. Every single component of this watch is gold. The dial, markers, hands. They use the same dial maker that made the dials for Philippe Dufour's simplicity. Handmade guilloche, something you don't see on even the Lange or the Pateks we were talking about. A beautiful piece of craft. To me, Patek Philippe, Lange, and Chopard are the holy trinity of three-hand dress watches from the 1990s. Now, the LUC 1860 was made in yellow, rose, white gold, along with platinum. Something people don't know is that there actually were a lot less produced than is estimated. So there were 3 references made. All were limited editions, but Chopard actually made substantially less than they intended to. For example, it was thought that they were going to make 1860 of each metal, so each of the 4 metals, but it's estimated that only a few hundred were actually made. So there are far fewer than many people realize of these, and to me, it's an event whenever one comes up. Similar pricing to the Langes and Pateks we've talked about. Again, the yellow gold with a silver dial is kind of the base price. You can expect maybe $15,000 on up from there. Some of my favorites are the blue dials, the salmon dials that in the last few years, Chopard has actually called back to with the modern iteration of the LUC 1860. But again, those are more expensive watches nowadays. Look back to the vintage, neo-vintage versions if you want something a little more accessible. Okay, before we get to a few more accessible dress watches from the 1990s, I want to talk about the Unpolished store. It's where we sell a curated selection of US-made straps for your watches. We make this matte calfskin strap. It's my favorite leather strap. It's why I decided it's the first strap I wanted to sell in the Unpolished store. It uses this beautiful French leather that sits as a nice blend of dressy and distress. I think it'd look great on any of the dress watches we're talking about here. I wear it on my Lange all the time, or a more rugged sports watch. Check these out in addition to the canvas straps that I sell at shop.unpolishedwatches.com. Also, everyone that subscribes to the newsletter gets 10% off all of their strap orders. I get that we've been talking about still expensive dress watches from Patek, Lange, Chopard, who I called the Holy Trinity, right? I get that we're still talking about $15,000, $20,000. It's more accessible than some of these modern watches, but still expensive, right? So I want to talk about one watch that was able to bring even better prices to kind of the quintessential ideal of a dress watch. It's the Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Control Collection. I think it represents something equally valuable. The Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Control Collection was introduced in 1992, is defined by something that none of these other brands could do even. Its own 1,000-hour certification. Every watch was tested for about 41 days before leaving the Jaeger-LeCoultre manufacturer in Le Sentier. It was tested at multiple temperatures, positions, magnetism before leaving the factory. Jaeger-LeCoultre introduced an original time and date model at 36 millimeters in stainless steel. You can find these things for well under $10,000 today. $5,000, $6,000 for a beautiful 1,000-hour certified Jaeger-LeCoultre is a lot of value to me. Consider that Jaeger-LeCoultre just re-released the spitting image of this watch just last year to celebrate the anniversary. You can also find they did this in gold as well, and even the gold ones are less than 10 grand nowadays. A pure gold Jaeger-LeCoultre dress watch for $10,000, it's hard to find anything even close to that good. From there, you can move on to complications, which is exactly what Jaeger-LeCoultre did in the 1990s. Power reserve, perpetual calendar, all in about a 37 millimeter case. They kept them pretty slim as well. Still dress watches that would, as we like to say, slip under a cuff. And there's the connection to Lange as well. As I mentioned, Gunther Blumlein, who helped define Lange, IWC, and Jaeger-LeCoultre, was helming all of these brands at the time. And he actually used some of Jaeger-LeCoultre's foundational watchmaking, some of their movements, as the gear trains, as the foundation for everything that Lange was doing. So if you can't quite get to the Lange point yet for one reason or another, look to Jaeger-LeCoultre. The 1990s were a weird, fertile, slightly chaotic time for watches, whether you were a large manufacturer or a small independent trying to establish themselves. The industry was rebuilding its identity, trying to figure out why someone would even buy a mechanical watch, why would even make a mechanical watch to begin with. The answer that they found is still some of the best answers that we've ever had. And nowadays you can buy a piece of that history for, like I said, $10,000 to $25,000. You're getting a piece of these manufacturers, these independent makers, for a fraction of what they're asking us to spend nowadays. It's part of the beauty of this era right now and why more collectors are flocking to it. This is only our 4th video, so thanks for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe on your way out, and let me know what you'd like to see more of. Also, go ahead and subscribe to our independent newsletter while you're at it. Like I said, it's all for collectors and enthusiasts. It doesn't run ads from brands, so it's all about you and what you want to see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.